Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into something that I think is becoming more and more important in the software world, and that's SBOMs.
SBOMs.
Yeah, software bill of materials or SBOMs, it's essentially like a detailed ingredient list, but for software applications.
Oh, right. Makes sense.
Uh,
Like, instead of just seeing the name of an app, we get a breakdown of every single component it uses.
exactly. And it's not just a matter of curiosity. This is becoming crucial for maintaining software integrity, managing security risks, and, securing the entire software supply chain.
Right. And from what I've been reading, organizations really need to be able to generate these SBOMs efficiently because these global requirements, they're not going away anytime soon.
That makes sense. It wouldn't be practical to manually track every single piece of software for every release.
Not at all. And it's interesting, too, because it's not as straightforward as you might think. There are actually a few different methods for generating these SBOMs, each with its own pluses and minuses when it comes to accuracy, completeness, and how well you can really see potential vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's break down those different methods a bit, shall we? Our source material highlights three main types: binary-based, source code-based, and build-time SBOMs.
Good place to start.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
So starting with binary-based SBOMs, what exactly are we talking about here?
Well, think about it this way. You have a finished software application, right? That's the compiled code that the computer can run. So with a binary-based SBOM, you're essentially analyzing that final product, trying to deduce what components and dependencies went into making it.
Like reverse engineering the recipe by tasting the finished dish.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
And our source points out that this approach is particularly useful in a couple of key situations. Well, imagine you're working with some legacy software system, and the original source code is lost to the sands of time.
Happens more than you'd think.
Right. So in that case, analyzing the binary might be your only option. Or think about those times when you're using some third-party software. You don't have access to their code, but you still need to understand what's in it. Binary-based SBOMs can provide that insight.
Yeah, you got to work with what you've got, right? But it sounds like there are some trade-offs with this approach. Our source mentioned some potential drawbacks in terms of missing certain details.
Yeah, and the big one is that you might miss critical information that's only really visible during the actual build process. For instance, statically linked libraries, they get embedded directly into the binary. While an analysis tool might detect some of their functionality, it's a lot harder to definitively say, okay, this is version X.Y of library Z without those build insights.
So you lose a bit of that historical record too, right?
Yeah.
Like the origin story of those components, where they came from, their development lineage that gets a bit murky.
Precisely. And this limited visibility directly contributes to a higher chance of false positives.
Ah, false positives. The bane of security analysis.
Oh, yeah, because without those build instructions, you're basically trying to piece together a puzzle without the picture on the box.
Right.
You might flag something as a potential issue that, with more context, you'd realize is totally benign.
So with binary-based SBOMs, you're getting some visibility, especially when you're in a bind with no source code. But it comes with the caveat that you need to be prepared for those less than perfect results.
Exactly. It's a tool in the toolbox, but not always the sharpest one.
Okay, so let's move on to the second type, source code-based SBOMs. What's the approach here?
As the name suggests, this is all about analyzing the source code itself, those human-readable instructions that developers write.
Right, so rather than looking at the finished product, you're going back to the blueprint. And our source suggests that this offers some pretty significant advantages, like complete visibility into everything that could end up in the final software.
Yes, and that's particularly helpful for things like license compliance. If you need to verify that all the licenses in use are okay, you've got that information right there in the code. Plus, it tends to be less computationally demanding compared to, say, a really deep dive into a complex binary.
Makes sense. You're not trying to untangle a compiled mess. You're reading the instructions. But our source also mentioned some challenges, particularly with how accurately the analysis reflects the final build configuration.
That's an important nuance, right? What's in the source code repository isn't always what ends up in the final product. Build processes can have all sorts of twists and turns, different conceptualizations for different environments or features. A simple source code analysis might not fully capture those complexities.
And then you have things like conditional compilation, where certain chunks of code only get included if specific conditions are met during the build. Hard to account for all of that just by looking at the source.
Very true. And on top of that, source code analysis typically doesn't catch those dependencies that only pop up at runtime. You know, those components that the software might download or link to only when it's actually running.
So you end up with this situation where the SBOM might be over-reporting,
Hmm.
including things that are in the source code but never actually make it into the deployed software.
Precisely. So more false positives, right? You might spend time investigating a vulnerability in something that's not even there.
Okay, so with source code-based SBOMs, you're getting a broad overview, which is great for early analysis and things like license compliance, but it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story of what's actually running in the end.
That's a good summary. And that leads us to the third approach, which, according to our source, aims to provide a more complete and accurate picture. Build-time SBOMs.
Build time. Sounds interesting. How does that work?
Well, instead of looking at the finished product or just the source code, build-time SBOMs are generated during the compilation process itself.
Uh-huh. So you're essentially watching the software being built and taking notes along the way.
Exactly. And that's really powerful because it means the SBOM captures the exact components used in that specific build. It's not a guess, it's a precise recording of what went in.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And it also means you're not just identifying a library, but also seeing which parts of it are actually used, right?
Exactly. And you capture those build time linked resources too. That level of detail really helps minimize those pesky false positives. Engineering teams can focus on actual risks, not phantom threats.
So less wasted time chasing shadows. But wouldn't this add extra complexity to the build process? Our source mentioned the importance of integrating this into existing CI/CD pipelines.
Yeah, that's a crucial consideration. You don't want the SBOM generation to slow down your development workflow, so you need tools that can seamlessly slot into those automated build processes. And it's not just for modern software either. Our source points out that if you have the source code, you can use build-time SBOMs even for legacy applications.
So no matter how old your code base is, if you can build it, you can get a precise SBOM for it. That's pretty impressive.
It is. So to wrap up this build time approach, it really does offer that most precise and comprehensive way to track everything that goes into your software. And as we've discussed, that accuracy is vital for strong software supply chain security and for minimizing those time-wasting false positives.
Right, so choosing the right SBOM generation tool is clearly not a trivial decision. It can have a pretty big impact on how effective your security efforts actually are.
And the key takeaway from our source, it seems, is to pick an approach that's aligned with your needs. Do you have source code access? What are your development processes like? How crucial is accuracy for your specific situation? All of those factors play a role.
Yeah, it's not one size fits all, but I think it's safe to say that for most modern development, aiming for that build time precision seems like a smart move.
Agreed. And if you think about it, that accuracy in understanding your software composition directly leads to better vulnerability management. You can quickly and confidently figure out if you're affected by a newly discovered vulnerability because you know exactly what's in your software.
And that translates to a stronger, more resilient software supply chain overall. You can respond faster, patch things more effectively, and ultimately deliver more secure products to your users.
Absolutely. And it's not just about security either. This ties directly into meeting those regulatory requirements that are becoming more and more common around the world.
Right. SBOMs are becoming a sort of essential passport for software in many contexts. Now, our source also touched upon an interesting area, CC++ projects. Apparently, these can present unique challenges when it comes to generating SBOMs.
Yeah, that caught my eye too. It has to do with the fact that, unlike newer languages that have really embraced package managers, C and C++E, with their long history, haven't standardized on a universal way to manage dependencies.
Right, so there's no single centralized system that tracks all those external libraries and components. That makes things a bit trickier.
It does. Our source mentions that SBOM generators for CC++ often have to rely on more indirect methods. Instead of just reading a package manifest file, they might analyze the compiler's file access patterns during the build or examine the symbols generated during compilation.
Sounds a bit like detective work.
Kinda, yeah. But what's fascinating is that even without that centralized package manager, you can still get a really high-fidelity SBOM for CC++ projects by tapping into those build insights. You get a clear picture of exactly what went into the final executable.
So that build time approach really shines through even in those more complex scenarios where there's no easy button for dependency management.
Absolutely, and especially for those working on real-time and embedded systems, often written in CC++, plus this granular visibility is even more critical. You need to know every single component in those safety-critical applications.
Okay, so bringing it all together, it's clear that choosing the right SBOM strategy is crucial for ensuring that your software is secure and meets those evolving compliance requirements.
Couldn't agree more. And the bottom line, really, is that strong SBOM practices are no longer just a nice to have.
They're table stakes.
Exactly. They're a fundamental part of building trust in the software we all rely on. And the good news is that regardless of which approach you choose, whether you're doing source code analysis, binary analysis, or going for that build time precision, you're taking a step in the right direction.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about knowing what's in your software so you can manage it effectively and keep those vulnerabilities at bay.
Well said. And, one thought I was having as we were going through all of this is, imagine if this kind of detailed ingredient list wasn't just for software.
Oh, that's interesting. Like for everything.
Yeah. Think about all the products we use every day. What if you could get an SBOM for your car, your phone, your appliances?
Wow. That would definitely change how we think about the things we buy and use, wouldn't it?
It would. A whole new level of transparency.
Food for thought, for sure.